Hello folk, how you doing? Scotty. So there's an anti-capitalist mentality, as you know, and some of you may have seen my recent video I did in response on a particular individual, and he goes on about a specific game character, and he hoards all this money for himself, and it creates this image. You know, although these games and films and stuff like that, it's all fiction mainly, you know, people actually go away believing that true to life. They think, oh well, this is what capitalism is, you know, as if to say, you know, this is the image of capitalism. A lot of people misinterpret what capitalism is. They don't understand, and it's actually one of the main reasons why I do the videos that I do. For those of you who might not have seen it, I did a response on a particular individual who's American, and this boy starts going on about this particular game character, and he starts to mention about a particular individual that hoards all the money for himself and whatever, when in truth it's really just an individual or specific individuals working in a specific games company who have this image in their head. This is capitalism, therefore we'll use this as an influence within the game or whatever. Unfortunately, there is this popular narrative that capitalism is really all just greed, and you know, it's about people hoarding everything off of themselves and a dangerous concentration of wealth in the hands of you. You get the point, because people's perception, they think that capitalism is the early stages of corporatism, or they think it is corporatism and what have you, and it just so happened to be, unfortunate as it is to say, you know, I absolutely love the series, despite and my favourite games, there was that anti-capitalist narrative that was pushed through in a particular game, Syndicate. You know, okay, the games are based on fiction. You're not going to see some assassins running around killing all sorts of people as if you would get away with that as if true to life. It wouldn't work like that in the real world. I think a lot of people love it for the historical sense, and people have been calling out for that. Although, you know, the first particular game, Assassin's Creed, however, it wasn't really the start of the Assassins with regards to the story. And Origins is actually the start of the Assassins, and the Assassins are the image of fighting for liberty. So you might, you know, consider them as people who fight for libertarianism as such, people who politically oppose this strong centralisation of power. Who they're basically fighting against is everything to do with the Order. And you can see even from the very first game of Assassin's Creed where they would have taken the influence from. It's really all to do with the New World Order. Even when you draw closer to, you know, the end of Assassin's Creed, you do get to see small elements of things that they probably would have taken influence from, you know, this Illuminati stuff. I don't particularly, you know, believe in all that Illuminati stuff and what have you, you know, all the sort of religious context and everything, the devil and the, you know, all that sort of stuff. I don't particularly believe that people are lizards and all the rest of this nonsense, right? I don't, you know, follow into that, but there is a truth true to real life with regards to where these games would have taken the influence, you know, where the game designers would have taken the influence, and that being the whole New World Order. Unfortunately, there are people who think that this is just some sort of conspiracy theory. I think that's part of what I loved about the Assassin's Creed series, the very fact that they would go into that sort of thing, and with regards to this order that seeks control and power. And at the end of the Assassin's Creed, I think the original game, there's even this, you know, spherical object. I don't know if they called it the apple within that particular game. It was a long time since I had played that in particular, but they do have this spherical object, and it's said that whoever holds it holds power and control over everybody else, etc. Although it's not an object in the real life, but you can kind of think of plot of the Order to try and control all wealth and power for themselves, you know, all the resources, and this is essentially what, you know, the globalist establishment. And like I said, I mean, there's sadly people out there, despite how well documented it is, people out there who think it's just some sort of conspiracy, that there's people who seek, you know, that level of control over everybody else. And you can look up the likes of Klaus Schwab, I think his name is. You can look up things relative to the Great Reset, which I will of course get on to. Probably my favourite was Assassin's Creed Odyssey, for kind of showing why such power and control over everybody else just doesn't work, and how human nature contradicts it all. Like I say, Origins itself happens to be the beginning of the story of Bayek, and I love the story of Bayek. You know, emotional story. You know, somebody loses their son and everything, and what he has to go through, you know, to get revenge and what happens, and then eventually they create the hidden ones, and the hidden ones would become basically the assassins. I think another thing I love about the particular games is getting to see historical stuff in that. Of course, there is a lot of things probably created as fiction. I don't know if there was a Colosseum within that region or whatever. Who knows? What do I know? There might have been amphitheatres or whatever. Getting to see actual historical landmarks like the pyramids within it and everything. And it's the same with all the series so far. They kind of think of this order as something, you know, oh, it's all, you know, capitalist and everything like that, you know. People don't realise that this, just like the real world, the aim of such centralisation, power and control over everybody else, all of that is in relation to do with socialism. It's nothing to do with capitalism, of course. It really does tell that when it comes to the story of Syndicate. It's so sad, but it's true. Now, yes, you know, to an extent, they do point out at the beginning of the games, okay, there's fiction, but there is an influence, shall I say. What influences the game creators into creating this, you know, narrative, this story? And there's sad truth, because this is the image of the Industrial Revolution that kind of they paint about capitalism and stuff like that. You know, they believe all these sort of myths, and it kind of goes throughout the games and films and all sorts. And let's just say with the Order, kind of like Odyssey with the cult of Cosmos and all the rest of this, again connecting to that of everything to do with the whole Illuminati sort of stuff and that, as if to say the establishment from this whole narrative are somehow capitalists, and capitalism's this evil you need to overthrow. It's like I say, it builds up to that with regards to one of the earlier games, which was of course Assassin's Creed Syndicate. The Great Reset, which I've touched upon before. Take, for example, the pandemic that came along. The whole thing with the rhetoric by the likes of Klaus Schwab, etc. Oh, you know, the Great Reset. We need to overthrow capitalism. And you heard that woman I've pointed out before, and she mentions how, oh, the virus knows no borders, so we need to take, you know, it's all the rhetoric to take control over people. You see it in Australia now, you're seeing it in Canada, you know, they're losing their freedom. You're starting to see the true colours of these so-called liberals. You will get socialists who won't like, you know, what I'm saying here. Although they might think of the Order from these games as something, oh, it's a symbol of, you know, capitalism. It really isn't. It's it's the true nature and face of socialism to that of the real world. The second Assassin's Creed, they do show you a lot of the stuff, and you do get to see like the Colosseum and everything like that. People who played the earlier games, they prefer that because it was based on the Assassins, and you know, I can see where they're coming from. But for me personally, I mean, I've loved every single one of the games thus far. It's been so long, however, since I played the earlier games, so I can't remember entirely the story. I can barely even remember what happens with Altair. Obviously I do remember there was something sad, so I'd have to go back and play that in order to fully comprehend or whatever. That was classified kind of like the third, but it wasn't. As well, of course, Revelations. I mean, each one of them have kind of had that sort of narrative. The third game being one based on the American Revolutionary War. Someone had asked me about that in particular, and I loved that particular game because it had the history of the American Revolution. But it all builds up, because I obviously done this Assassin's Creed Syndicate before I had moved on to the likes of Origins, Odyssey, and of course Valhalla. And it's just like that boy was saying, you know, because he was so gripped by a particular moment. And that happens, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's films. Believe it or not, even if fiction, certain films and certain games and stuff like that, even music can have an influence on people. They feel a connection, and they connect that to what, you know, things are like in life. The entire plot and everything was just so anti-capitalist. I mean, it was this narrative as if to paint, you know, the factory owners as these evil men who needed to be overthrown, as if they enslaved the children into working in the factories and beat them up and all the rest of this. It goes along with the, you know, mainstream narrative, paints this narrative that, oh, you have to overthrow them and the workers take ownership and everything, and it goes along with this. I think this is probably where the name Syndicate probably comes from, the syndicalism and all the rest of this. You've probably heard of it. But that's kind of the narrative that you get out of the Assassin's Creed. They even try to paint, you know, someone like Karl Marx as this revolutionary that's fighting for the people, and even the likes of Charles Darwin, etc. And again, it does touch upon at the start that there is a certain level of fiction and whatever, but there is that influence, and people go away believing that as if true to life, and they do see it, that it does have an influence, whether people believe, you know, otherwise. But when you actually analyse all the games, like if you're someone like me who's played like pretty much most of them, if you've got an establishment who are seeking an order and control over everybody else, which is basically like a central, you know, authority, a central government or whatever, and it's seeking control over everybody's economic lives and taking control and power over everybody else, that's not capitalism. that's anti-capitalism. That is essentially a big part of socialism. I don't need to go into it because I've touched upon in my videos, you know, I've explained about the whole thing with regards to the political centralisation being a very big part of socialism. And there are sadly people out there who think, oh well, the establishment's capitalist. Really isn't the case. It's laughable to say the least. The best out of them all, I would argue, and that's nothing against the particular recent, which was Valhalla. I mean, I love Valhalla. For the sake, you could just chop people's heads off and everything in that. With regards to the story, everything to do with, you know, the story behind Cassandra in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's a beautiful story. It made it feel like it was an actual film, and I wish they would actually do a film out of it. But what I love the most is that it really does, like, again, correlating to life, that people are not chess pieces on a chessboard. People are not people you can just, you know, control. You get that sense from the game because when you go into the expansion and you're playing Atlantis, at the end of Atlantis, for those who have completed it and understand, humanity is something that just cannot be controlled. Before you even reach to Atlantis, there's this like sort of fairy tale place that's people supposed to go, and the Aisu kind of rule over. It's this sort of place where there's constant conflict between the humans and that of the Aisu themselves, but people cannot be controlled. That's kind of the whole thing that builds up, and it kind of illustrates when you complete the entire thing and Atlantis ends up going underwater from the decision you make. Says that no matter how many times they've tried Atlantis over and over in a near repetitive cycle, they've failed each and every single time to try and change. And no matter how many times they tried, the same result would turn out. And that's kind of like painting the image that this really does epitomise socialism. No matter how many times you try it over, it doesn't matter how many times you try to play God with people, it doesn't matter how often you try to manipulate and change things, it never works. It never ever does. Illustrating why, you know, individualism, why individual liberty suits human nature best. Trust me, you will get people in the comment section going off their nut because of the fact I've said all this, and it kind of paints the true narrative of what socialism's like. Socialists just don't like the truth. It is a sad truth, right? They don't like it because it's the true nature of what you've always seen of socialism. Again, the difference between theory and practice. Even it was the same with Rogue. You know, each one of these games, of course, Unity. Through each one of them, it's all been the same. I would say Valhalla less so. Some things in Valhalla, it does show there are certain people within the Order who give that image of their obsession to control everybody for a better life or whatever. Valhalla is less about being the assassins. You're the Vikings. What I do like about it, however, is of course you're carrying out something that did happen in history, and that was of course the Angles had, you know, invaded the Norse as well, invaded and had conquered what was to become England. It doesn't matter whether it's films, which I hope they do, you know, films at these type of games and that, because they'd be unbelievable. Like there was even something of a short clip of a short film, and it was just, you know, fantastic enough as it is. And I wish they would do films such as on Odyssey and Valhalla, you find this anti-capitalist narrative painted everywhere. They don't realise that the establishment who seek the order, they are the socialists. They just don't like the truth. The real world of socialism would not end like that. The real world of socialism would end in terror. It always does, just like what you saw of the Paris Commune and everything like that. You know something? I've thoroughly enjoyed, you know, all the games, regardless. Especially Valhalla, which has been absolutely amazing. Especially adding in things like, you know, the historical landmarks like Hadrian's Wall and the story and everything that kind of follows the history, the story of Cassandra. I just happen to love the particular games and the story that's carried out through it of it all, and you know, I hope they do, you know, the films. Anyway, folk, I don't know if you've got anything you would like to add in, something that I might have missed out or that. You can fling it in for yourself and your own personal opinion. So if you've got anything you'd like to add in, comment in the comment section below and I'll be sure to get back to you. Be sure to like the video, share the video, and of course, I'll be sure to get back to you. Thank you for watching, and I shall talk to you later. Cheers.